The very first star I ever worked with was Diana Ross. So as a child, I'm working with one of the biggest stars on the planet. Thank God I did that, and thank God it wasn't.
The connections they had with Motown, meeting Diana Ross, could not have come at a better time for Noel and Bernard. The ending of disco was really bad. Even though all that happened, Chic still had a #1 with Good Times.
Everybody has certain guidelines that they work by. You know, I mean, in other words, we have a certain formula for doing what we do. However, we absolutely write and produce differently for each one of those artists.
Noel and Bernard were banging out hits, song after song for Diana Ross, reinventing her career again.
You and Bernard have been together for a long time, haven't you?
About 13 years. As our relationship developed from music.
Nile was on the search for new projects. He wanted to work with David Bowie. He wanted something new. He wanted to be able to take that next step. And he had to do it without Bernard. David Bowie is a very open person. He grew up listening to all kinds of genres. Nile was taken away that David was so into all kinds of music. For example, jazz. Being that visionary that David Bowie was, he knew that Nile would help him create a new record. Something that had never been done before. Working with David Bowie was a lot easier for Nile because David Bowie at the time didn't even have a record label. His career was all over the place. Where when he was working with Diana Ross, he had to go through all kinds of different people and deal with all the politics. It was simple with David Bowie. But Noel was the producer. He hired in different musicians, Tony, keyboard player, but at the time, Bernard and Tony weren't reliable enough. They were too into drugs. Noel really needed professionals who were more reliable. Now, Tony played on a few of the hits. Bernard actually only one. And despite the sort of tension between Bernard and Nile, David Bowie was very impressed with Bernard's playing. He came in and did it in one take.
I remember asking him, "Oh, David, I feel a little weird. Did I make this too funky?" Classic David Bowie moment. He says, "No, darling, is there such a thing?"
Dead Dance was a smash hit worldwide. It recreated David Bowie's career. Noel felt really naive about their friendship. He was reaping all the success and taking all the credit. He felt a little bitter and sort of used by David Bowie on the records. He got what he wanted. And Noel just wanted a bit of recognition. The situation did change with David Bowie. David said, "This goes out to Nile Rodgers, the only man who could make me start a song with a chorus."
Some artists have had their biggest hits when collaborating with you, like Madonna, you know, Material Girl, Like a Virgin. Yeah. You were the master behind a number of her biggest hits. What was that like, you know, in retrospect, what was that like?
It was my job.
After the success with David Bowie, Nile was working with everyone. Paul Simon, INXS, Hall & Oates, Southside Johnny, and Duran Duran. And after hearing about Madonna from a friend...
Remember, when I worked with Madonna, this was at the beginning of her career.
Madonna was an opening act for Jenny Burton. Madonna was on the rise. Confidence was coming out of Nile. He was so confident when he started recording Like a Virgin. He said, "This is going to go platinum." He had that confidence. Nile and Madonna were hanging out like two brothers and sisters. They were going to the clubs, but at the same time, they did party hard, but they worked hard. Nile has great people skills. He really knew how to work with people. And he even said that You know, Madonna used to be a very nasty piece of work in the studio, yelling at people, gaslighting them, shouting at them to kind of get her own way. But Nile had a way of working with her.
Nile, do you think I'm sexy? And I went, Madonna, what kind of question is that? Of course, you're like one of the sexiest women I ever met. Well, then why don't you want to? So that's what.
So then, and then what did you say?
I said, because I'm your producer. And she said, well, I didn't stop any of the other ones.
She always had her way with people, and she knew how to win. She promoted her album, and it went straight to #1. She was a star. Madonna then became the queen of pop. After success working with Madonna, Nile was asked to work on the Live Aid record in 1985, We Are the World. Live Aid was a revolution, and for Nile, 1985 was a year Nile really started self-reflecting. He started to question himself. He wanted to know who he was. And at the time, Nile was working on more projects than he could actually handle. He was working very hard. He was partying everyone. He was drinking. He was doing drugs. He had women, but it was the cocaine. His addiction to cocaine that really started to catch up with him. And as the great song says, Nile was really running on empty. He had so much success. The 80s were incredible for Nile Rodgers. He was working with everybody. You know, he started living that luxurious lifestyle. He could buy a car. He had a nice apartment. He was getting everything he wanted. Money was never an issue at the time, but he said, just like a spoilt child, I spiraled out of control. Throughout the 80s, he drove deeper and deeper into drug addiction. And Nile said, was the cocaine industry out of control, or was it just me?
The hedonistic lifestyle that I was living only became dangerous for me much later in the 90s. So I lived.
Death wasn't very uncommon for Nile. He came up through a really rough background. He witnessed a lot of deaths. He saw a lot of homicides during his time. During the 80s, it was a real tough time. His friends around him started dropping off like flies. And then after 6 months of the passing of Stevie Ray Vaughan, Nile was really drunk. He was so drunk he couldn't even stand up and ended up vomiting in his own mouth. He was found on the floor with no pulse. Nile was laying in the hospital bed and doctors were ready to call the day. And the doctor said, his heart is starting to beat again, all by itself. Nile was given another lifeline, another chance, humbled and felt ashamed. Death really had visited Nile on many different occasions. It just wasn't his time. In the early 90s, partying had become more important to Nile than actual music. He cared more about who he was hanging around with, and he was hanging around with the wrong crowds. And the amount of money that Nile was spending, he was spending so much money at the time. Actually, this took such a huge toll on his bank account. He was spending thousands on cocaine. And he did it all just for people just to like him. He wanted to be liked.
What frightened me was one day at Madonna's birthday party in 1994 in Miami Beach. I went to her house, and I don't remember, people told me this story, but I was the last person to leave. Madonna, who was a great friend and the biggest artist I ever worked with, was begging me, no, please leave, there's no one here. People carried me to my hotel room, and after they carried me, I let them leave, and I went out to party even more. And I suffered from cocaine psychosis, where you hear voices, and that was the first time that ever happened to me.
And actually one day he read that Keith Richards would sober out, and he said to himself, are you kidding me? If he can do it, I can do it. So then Nile checked himself into rehab. After 8 months in recovery, funny enough, it was Keith Richards who first spoke to Nile when he came out. The man that actually inspired Nile to go into rehab had called him straight away after he came out. Keith himself, but actually Keith was calling him up because he was trying to get a score, obviously clearly failing to keep his own habit. Nile was determined to stay sober. He was seeing friends on a weekly basis overdose and die from drugs and alcohol abuse. And to the rescue came a longtime friend, his musical partner, his co-worker, co-founder of the Chic organization, Bernard Edwards. And he came back. Bernard Edwards helped Nile get back on the stage again. He was giving him the confidence to perform again. And even nights when Nile was drugged up completely, embarrassing himself on stage, playing poorly, that he never realised how bad he was playing. He finally kicked his drug habits, was back on stage, and he did shout, "I belong here," because he does.
What frightened me was one day at Madonna's birthday party in 1994 in Miami Beach. I went to her house, and I don't remember, people told me this story, but I was the last person to leave. Madonna, who was a great friend and the biggest artist I ever worked with, was begging me, "No, please leave, there's no one here." People carried me to my hotel room, and after they carried me, I let them leave, and I went out to party and I suffered from cocaine psychosis where you could hear voices. And that was the first time that ever happened to me.
Super Producers 96, Nile Rodgers.
And it was 1996. Chic were back. Nile and Bernard were back together. They were touring. They were touring all over the world. Times had changed, and Nile had changed. Chic were huge again. They even had guest performances such as Slash, and that was during a performance in Tokyo. Everything changed from Tokyo, 1996 in Japan.
Woo! Now, this is my partner. He's not only my partner in music, but he's my partner in life. If it wasn't for him, I would not be here in Tokyo tonight. On funky bass, Bernard Edwards.
Okay. Let's get some to this man here.
Now, the young man over there.
You gotta break down, he can't talk tonight.
Yeah, I'm a little sick tonight. I got the Tokyo flu. But we're still here. This is my dearest friend in the world. Been together since we were about 17 years old. And we're well into our 40s now. So we've been together a long time, and I love him dearly.
Bernard was on stage. He had pneumonia. He was standing, he was playing, he was smiling, he was doing his thing. It was during the cover of David Bowie's Let's Dance. The bass just suddenly cut out. And Nile said, "Wow, that's genius. Why didn't I think of that before?" Nile looked over to Bernard thinking to give him a little wink to say, "That's great." He couldn't see him. He was looking around to see if he could find him, but Bernard was passed out on the floor. Bernard couldn't stand anymore, so he did the rest of the show sitting down. After the show, Bernard was exhausted. The live performance was 3 hours, a 3-hour marathon. When back in the hotel, Bernard refused anything to eat. He just wanted to go to sleep, but it was that night. He went to sleep for the final time. Japan is a known place for earthquakes. They have thousands of earthquakes every year, and Nile was asleep one night. It was around 1:30 in the morning, and Nile felt it was like an earthquake, he said. He was waking up from a bad dream. So Nile got up the next morning, banging on Bernard's door. Nile woke up the next morning, banging on Bernard Edwards' door. He's saying, "Come on, man, you're late. We have to make it to the airport." Bernard didn't open the door. Nile had to go and ask the hotel reception to open the door for him. And that's when he found Bernard Edwards, age 46, dead in his hotel room.
Now, I know that most of you people, when you see a show like this, it probably looks very simple and very easy, but believe it or not, it was very difficult. It took a long time. It took a whole year of planning, and I'll tell you, the crew was massive and they were fantastic. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of the technical people, all of the musicians, all of the crew, the interpreters, everybody who dealt with us, because I know it was difficult. But most of all, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart my partner, Bernard Edwards, because as I said earlier, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been here. He really helped me. He gave me all the inspiration. Right from the first moment I met him. He actually even taught me how to play guitar with the style that I play, because I was a jazz guitarist, and Bernard showed me this whole new funky style. And I just want to say thank you, Bernard. Thank you, everybody who helped put this show on, and I want to dedicate this show to Bernard Edwards. Thank you very much for a good life and good music and good friendship.
After the death of Bernard Edwards, Nile carried on working with all kinds of artists. Steve Vai, Bob Dylan, Britney Spears, Elton John, Josh Stone. Nile really stepped up. He had to continue the Chic legacy in memory of Bernard Edwards. Flying back into New York on September 10th, 2001, Nile quoted that the pilot said, "That's some storm we got out there, folks. It looks like we've just made it." After 9/11, calls really rang out over New York that we are family. We are a team. We have to stick together. So Nile received a call from Tommy Boy Records, and they wanted to fund a project for We Are Family, 200 celebrities all together singing the song For America. See, Nile had contacts. He'd been working with musicians for years. He even contacted musicians from his own Sesame Street days. And this is when the We Are Family Foundation was formed. It wasn't actually until this moment that Nile really understood the meaning behind We Are Family. He was sober. His life was really coming together. Nile says that yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, today's a gift, that's why we call it the present. Nile was back working in the music industry. He was back on top. He was actually flying out to Rome. He got a call from his doctor. "Nile, we need to talk right now. Please come right away to discuss this aggressive form of cancer growing." Nile, like the true performer he is, didn't want to cancel the show. And Rome, of course, was a great show.
In the rock and roll business, death is almost as common as losing your record deal.
Nile Rodgers got the diagnosis of cancer. He was battling cancer on and off for years. In 2010, Nile was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer.
Death was all around me. I have a blog that I do. Once cancer attacked me, I didn't know what to do. I was afraid. And there's one picture that I post every few months or so, and it has the original 5 men from the Chic organization, and 4 of those 5 are dead, and I'm the only one left. Luther Vandross has passed away, Raymond Jones, Tony Thompson, and Bernard Edwards, and I'm the only other man in that picture. And
now, while going through cancer, Nile did what he did best. He did his own kind of therapy. That was something called music. Nile Rodgers was battling cancer, and at the same time, he was creating hits. Hit after hit. Again, it was all coming back to him. Nile kept writing a blog on the internet. He was writing about his journey through cancer, some great stories about even one time when he lost his own guitar. Life was up and down for him at the time, but he was carrying on gigging. Actually, a show that I even went to in London. After many therapy sessions, having to have surgery, Nile was given the good news that he was cancer-free. Nile was smiling in photos. He was on stage. He was writing blogs at the same time as battling cancer. It really does show you don't know anyone. You really don't know another person until you've walked a mile in their own shoes. It is so humbling reading the work of Nile Rodgers. Nile was working on tours, travelling around the world. Nile didn't miss a show in 6 years. Actually, until he suffered food poisoning in August 2017. With Nile, it's always about the show must go on.
it's just so wonderful to play music that I've written and produced, and to be on stage with a great group of people who love the music, to see the audience's appreciation for the song, to make a few mistakes every now and then and have the people play along with it. It's great.
Music evolves, and Nile was a rare breed of musicians who understood the next stage of music.
So what happens is that the music evolves. It has no choice. It's just like life. It's just like everything else on this planet, right? We evolve. Everything gets better.
Disco wasn't ever destroyed, it just evolved. Nile always kept his style. He just put that into a different context, just into a different way.
says that EDM is just a natural progression of hip hop.
So many drummers or so many bass players would put out the work in the 80s and even more in the 90s. They didn't adjust like Nile did. Yeah, guitarists lost work too, but they just had to adjust, they had to adapt. And they couldn't adapt like the way Nile did. He is still relevant today. He is current today. He's still gigging today. He even has a tour with Cher this year. Actually, that was cancelled due to obviously what is going on at the moment. But Nile will be continuing to be working in music. He will be around for years and years to come.
The thing that you live for, the thing that you dream about when you're younger is, man, maybe one day I'll go out on stage and I'll play all my own music.